Let's just breathe together for a moment, celebrating freedom. Happy Freedom Day. Celebrating our fathers and that divine masculine that's been holding it down for millennia. Taking it all in. Taking it all in and remembering that it is always good and moving for good. And that as we celebrate freedom today, we have to celebrate what it means to be free. So let's just get into it, because it's uncomfortable shit. Ernest Holmes, the founder of Science of Mind, says, in our ignorance of truth, we have misused the highest power we possess. And so great is the power, so complete is our freedom in it, so absolute the domain of law through it, that the misuse of this power has brought upon us the very conditions from which we suffer. Yeah, amen. Read the shirt. Amen. Amen. Our misuse of power is the cause of all suffering in the history of this planet. But I think it's important to go back to the first line. In our ignorance of the truth, we have misused the highest power we possess. The ignorance of truth is the misuse of power. And who takes responsibility for ignorance? Anybody? Who can be ignorant? Me, you. So who gets to take responsibility for your ignorance? I do. Let's go to the definition of power. One definition is possession of control, authority or influence over others. Yet physics tells us that energy delivered or transferred is defined as power. Energy delivered or transferred. Any of you breathing today? Which means you are alive. And you know how you become alive? Because you have energy animating your being. And that energy has one source. Anybody? Spirit, the divine, Allah, the creator. Whatever you want to name this source, this holy, blessed source. Every single one of us with breath in our bodies right now is animated by the energy of the one. And power is defined as the giving of energy, the transfer, the use of our energy is what power actually is. All of these other definitions of power are created by the ignorance of truth. When you are ignorant of your divine nature, when you are ignorant of what you are made of, and you seek power out here, this is where all suffering begins. And so it is our responsibility to solve this problem, this misuse of power that has been plaguing humanity for millennia. It is a spiritual solution. The only solution that will solve this misuse is by becoming willing to let go of our ignorance. Becoming willing to step into our divine nature and make use of this aliveness that we've been gifted with. Make use of the power that is inherent in each and every one of us. I don't have more power than you do. You don't have more power than me. Because we don't define God, aliveness, by BS systems and structures that were made up out of ignorance. Amen? Amen. So if we want to solve these dilemmas, global suffering, it has to begin with an understanding and embodiment of truth. Let me bring it back to Ernie. So great is this power, so complete is our freedom in it, so absolute the domain of law through it, that the misuse of this power has created all suffering, all the conditions from which we suffer. And the misuse, I know most of us want to go to the stories of misuse, the history of misuse. And there are countless stories. I could stand up here for the next hour and share 2.5% of my own. But we have to drill down. We have to drill down into the root cause of suffering. And the root cause is ignorance. The ignorance of truth. All the great books have some kind of saying, the truth shall set you free. The only way the truth can set us free is when we become conscious users of our energy. The power we each have to wield. This power is not handed out by bosses or parents or presidents or dictators. This power is already here in each one of us. And when we get conscious about the use of that power, we begin to see the change in these outer circumstances, in the conditions of the world that we deeply, deeply long for. But we have to be willing to take responsibility for it. We have to be willing to take responsibility for this absolute power of powers that we each have. How many of you believe that you are a leader? You cannot have breath in your body, the energy of the Holy Blessed One, animating your very life force, and not be a leader. You are the boss of you, as I like to say. You lead the use of your energy. And we must understand the gravity of that. That every word, that every thought, that every feeling, that every expression, that every interaction, that every step I take has an impact on the whole, period. That's science. It's an unarguable truth. Which means your conscious embodiment and use of your energy matters. You are not too small to make a difference. You're making a difference with every breath you take. The question becomes, what difference are you making? What are you giving your energy to? Every thought directs energy. So it begins with allowing yourself to become conscious of what's actually going on in here. I want to share with you from Lama Rod Owens from Radical Dharma, which he was a contributor with Rev Angel Kyoto Williams. And he says, I'm not liberated. Liberation is a process. And I think one of the first important things I had to do is stop believing in my own inferiority. I had to actually stop believing what the world was trying to tell me I was. He happens to be a Black gay man. And I had to develop an experience of who I was on a fundamental level. How many of you have had a moment, or many moments, where you struggled with inferiority? Wow, white people raise their hand too. Men raise their hand too. This dilemma of the misuse of power and the systems and structures we've created as a result of ignorance isn't solved by only white-bodied folks, isn't solved by only folks with significant social privilege. This spiritual solution must be sought by each one of us, because there's only one whole. There's only one life. One of our favorite prayers around here is, there is one life. That life is God's life. That life is perfect, and that life is my life now. That's how important you are. That's how much you matter. Your ignorance has to be remedied. And the other lovely truth is that we're all ignorant. A lot of hands went up when I asked if you've struggled with inferiority, which also means you struggle with ignorance. Because inferiority is not a possible truth when you recognize that you are a manifestation of the Holy Blessed One. You cannot be inferior. That's not one of the choices for God. And so when we take responsibility for our own ignorance of truth, we begin to take back our power. We begin to say, oh, no, ignorant created systems and structures that try to define who I am. Oh, no, inferiority. Not possible. Not possible. And I know for me, that work requires me to turn off the noise. That work requires me to put away the stories, the pressures, the lies that I've inherited, that I continue to confront out in this crazy ass world. And I have to intentionally turn that all down so that I can turn up the truth. We call this spiritual practice. It is not for some purpose where we think we're going to climb a holy mountain and get to the top and hang out with the other mystics. Its purpose is so that we can step into the power that is already so that we can put down the misbeliefs, the ignorance, and make use of this incredible aliveness that we've been gifted with. How many of you struggle with the idea that aliveness is a gift? Anybody feel like aliveness is a struggle? that we're on this planet to be in the life school and learn lessons.
Used to.
Yeah. What if that was not the case? I just want you to take a minute right now and breathe in to the possibility that your aliveness, that your very life has one purpose. One, to celebrate the divine nature that you are. That aliveness is for the purpose of glorifying and expressing divinity, inherent connection, beauty, love, harmony. What if that was the purpose of being alive? And all the learning and all the lessons and all the opportunities that we bump into that are painful, uncomfortable. What if all of those things are not the purpose of aliveness, but just chances to get more in alignment with what is true? What if we just got in right relationship with our own aliveness? And the only way I know to do that is a major paradigm shift, which requires us to turn our attention from out here, from false ideas of power like control, authority over, and turn our entire attention into what is true, which is that I am an emanation of the Holy Blessed One, that you are an emanation of the Holy Blessed One. And when that is the foundation you move from, everything out here begins to shift. Our very experience of aliveness becomes one of joy. Rev. Angel Kyoto in Radical Dharma also reminds us that we have to commit to our own liberation regardless of what happens outside. That's the paradigm shift. If we are giving our energy, our power to what's happening here, what's happening in politics, what's happening in systems and structures that attempt to define you and I, if that's where I put my attention, I've let go of the greatest power I have access to. When I put my attention on the stories of injustice, when I put my attention on the stories of misuse of power, I give power to it. Because I am responsible for this power I am, for this truth that I am. Which means I have a choice to make. When I have that paradigm shift and when I decide that my greatest attention is going to be on what is true, my greatest attention is going to be on how I can more and more align myself and center myself in truth. When I confront injustice and misuse of power, when I run into those moments, when I hit those walls, I run into them completely powerful rather than powerless. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Do you get the difference?
Yes.
Because this is not about spiritual bypass and ignoring the realities of injustice and misuse of power. This is about being the most powerful version of yourself to meet those circumstances. Yes? Yes. That's how good God is. Every single story of triumph, every single story of resurrection, every single story of civil rights actors and actresses who created incredible change in this world, why do you think that story was able to be? Because they were powerful. They were full of their divine nature. They met the moment with their own power. Imagine the world we get to live in when all of us show up powerful. Imagine the change that becomes possible out here when you show up to it in absolute power. The greatest power we possess, free. We don't have to wait for somebody to tell us we're free. There is no power outside of us that has the authority to free us. That has never been the case. It is not possible. And so when we take responsibility for our own freedom, then we begin to align ourselves, our highest capital S divine blessed self, with the greatest power in the universe. And then we get to make some choices about how we use that power, what we give that power to. Take a moment right now and breathe into that space that knows that it knows that it knows, that is infinitely powered, and think about a situation in your life that you would do different right now, knowing that you had access to infinite power. That you could not fail. Because that's how good God is. And that's just one drop in the ocean of change that becomes possible when you take your power back. I've got homework for you. So you've identified this place where maybe you've given your power away, yes? Where maybe you have drank the Kool-Aid and believed something about yourself that is untrue. I want you to think about whether that is in a relationship with a family member where you have taken on a belief that is untrue. Maybe it's a school environment, a work environment. Maybe you've believed a theology or a religious ideology that has told you something silly about yourself. There is nothing in you that must change except your understanding of who and what you are. So as you acknowledge that you drank the Kool-Aid, I want you to now take a moment. We're going to take the next 60 seconds together. We're going to breathe into the release of the misbelief and the claiming of what is true. So close your eyes with me. Letting go of a false truth that you have inherited, that you took on. And then know with me that there is one life. That life is God's life. That life is perfect. And that life is my life now. And so in this place of centered truth, let us affirm this truth in prayer. There is one life, and that life is holy, that life is blessed. That life is perfect in a way that we have yet to fully wrap our minds around. But what I know is that that wholeness, that completeness, that God-powered self is bubbling up more wholly, more fully, more consciously than it ever has before for each and every one of you. Because I know that that bubbling up is the very life of God, looking for its way into life itself through you, through me. And that this perfect motion of the Holy Blessed One is always moving, is always bubbling up. And I know that each one of us has a holy yes to acknowledging what is so, to gathering up the very power that is the spirit of good, the spirit of joy, the spirit of love, the spirit of harmony, the spirit of connection. And as we gather, as we take back, as you take back your identity, as you take back your own thinking about what is true, about yourself, about life, about the world. As we each take that power back, then we gather that power and we use it. We use it in a way that affects the outer circumstances for good. We do so with every fiber of our being because that is what aliveness is. And we do it with delight. The delight and the gratitude for being alive and conscious of the greatest power in the universe. And I know that each one of us takes responsibility for that power that lives in our very breath. And we make good work of it. And it makes all the difference. And for this truth, I am beyond grateful. And so I just let it be, unfolding in all its beauty in each and every one of our lives. Anchor it with me by saying amen. Amen. And so it is.